You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth!
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth!
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, folks, time to get into the rant today. And this was inspired by a headline that I saw as I was preparing the news today from the Seattle Times. It says, City Council move most medical pot patients to recreational system. And it just brought to mind the question, in Colorado and in Washington State, they have both the recreational marijuana law, if you're healthy, and the medical marijuana law, if you're sick. And that leads me to ask, why have both a medical marijuana and a recreational marijuana system? Now, in this Seattle City Council vote, according to the story in the Seattle Times, there was a unanimous vote amongst the Seattle City Council, all 9 members. They sent, well, not a vote, they unanimously sent a letter to Governor Jay Inslee and some other legislators. And they basically said most medical marijuana patients should be brought into the recreational pot market that the state is creating. The Seattle Times reports the medical marijuana market continues to operate at best in a gray market, council members said, which could undermine the state's goal of curtailing illicit dealing through a legal system allowing adults to possess small amounts of weed. Now, this gray market system that they're talking about is the dispensaries, patient co-ops, and so forth, farmers markets, and collectives. Now, collectives have been allowed. You can collectively cultivate 45 plants, 10 members in a collective, according to the Washington rules. Also, in Washington, there is a difference between the medical marijuana law and the recreational marijuana law, the most glaring one being that the recreational users don't get home grow and medical users do. In fact, it's a huge difference in that recreational users get 0 plants and medical users get 24, or is it 15 plants? 15 plants in Washington State. So better adjust that graphic too, Russ. It's not 24 plants, it's 15 home plants. Oh my goodness. I was thinking of Oregon. So that got me confused, but 15 home plants in state of Washington, or 45 if 10 people are collectively cultivating them. And 24 ounces of possession for medical users, 1.5 pounds compared to the 1 ounce possession that recreational users get. And so the other consideration too would be the taxation. I-502 put together an intense amount of taxation, 25% at 3 different levels, at producer, processor, and retailer, as well as an average of almost 9% taxes at the city and state level. Sales tax, right? So they're projecting, some expensive marijuana up there in Seattle, at least expensive taxes in Seattle and the rest of Washington. The gray market area they talk about, though, these farmer markets and dispensaries are currently not taxed, really. Some of them are paying a sales tax, some of them aren't. There's no other taxes involved here. So the problem exists, and this was pointed out by Mark Kleiman, the Botech head, the consultant that was brought in to run the program there, that basically you create this incentive for healthy users to undercut the taxation in the regulated market by getting their medical recommendation, being able to either grow their own at home or purchase much lower priced cannabis at these medical markets. And this is something that the No on 502 people, to give them their due, kind of predicted. They kind of predicted that if there was a recreational market with 90% of the purchasers in it that was highly taxed, and a medical market with 10% of the purchasers in it that is very low tax, there would be that perverse incentive. And to eliminate that perverse incentive, there would be a move to try to just make both markets the same, just, put them together, merge those two markets. So to be fair, that was somewhat of the prediction. And the other point, to be fair to medical users, is they'll point out that most states don't tax prescription drugs, don't tax medicines. So why go ahead and tax patients, the sickest and most disabled people, the people in the frailest economic condition? Why try to balance budgets and raise revenues off the backs of the sick and dying? So there is that angle to be put forth. But the other angle is, if medical marijuana is to progress in any other state that doesn't currently have it, it's going to be more difficult to sell that if it's seen in the Western states as just being an excuse to avoid taxes. It's going to be very difficult to maintain such a huge gap between the medical users being untaxed and having huge possession amounts and huge plant amounts versus the recreational being overtaxed, having 1 ounce and no home grow. And the way the Seattle City Council is looking at this, they may be right from a practical perspective. I'm not judging the morality of either position at this point, but from a practical perspective, it's going to be very difficult to prevent that crossover. And if we fail to prevent that crossover, what will the reaction of the federal government be? They've given us the August 29th memo with the 8 position points. And if there's a lot of undercutting of taxes and a lot of people trying to get medical, how will the feds react to that? The city council writes, while many medical customers live with conditions ameliorated by medical cannabis, the vast majority do not and would be better served through the access made possible by Initiative 502. And that's more of that typical look at medical marijuana where they divide patients into 2 classes. People that absolutely have to have pot or they'll die versus people who have to have pot because it makes their life better, but it's not going to kill them if they don't have it, right? The cancer patient versus the pain patient, which I think is a ridiculous distinction anyway, but let's see what they're trying to say here. Living with conditions ameliorated by medical cannabis, but the vast majority do not live with conditions that are ameliorated by medical cannabis. Sure they do. It's just you don't think they're as important. You don't think it's life-threatening. It's that whole medicine of last resort thinking that they're exhibiting there by the city council. The city council continues to say combining the recreational and medical markets into a single regulated system would work, that patients, quote, deserve a system that supports development of medicines appropriate to different conditions at a price point patients can afford. So what might be the effect of this? If they do go and merge these 2 markets, if they eliminate the medical market and force everyone to be a part of this recreational market, will they be able to maintain support for such high taxation? Will the medical card become just a tax rebate or something given at the counter? It's going to be difficult to figure out how they're going to work all of this, but it seems to me that it's going to be very difficult to keep that gulf, that great divide between the home growers and the non-home growers, the 24-ounce possession versus an ounce possession, and the price points. I do not see how they can run side by side. I would prefer that in a regulated market, a legal market, that it doesn't matter whether you're sick or not, you have access to cannabis, but it should also be not taxed so highly that it becomes too much of a problem for patients to be able to afford. And I believe in the long run, as prices of marijuana drop and its legality becomes more acceptable, and perhaps, who knows, maybe even insurance starts to cover it at some point, then that becomes less of an issue. But in the short term, for many of these patients, and a lot of whom only have a short term left in their lives, this is going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to cause a lot of friction. It's going to cause patients who were used to spending just a little bit on cannabis having to spend more on cannabis. It's going to cause an outcry from the medical community that you thought, if you thought the No on 502 people were loud before, it's going to get really loud if this happens. Now, to look at the other state, in Colorado, I don't think it's as much as an issue in Colorado. Because unlike Washington, which tried to regulate dispensaries only to get them line item vetoed by the governor, in Colorado, they've had a well-regulated medical marijuana system for quite some time. And in designing Amendment 64, actually considered how the medical market was going to be folded in with the recreational market. And in another wise move for Amendment 64, they didn't make the gap between medical and recreational so great. Now, to be fair, the people writing I-502 couldn't have possibly floated a legalization proposal that allowed people to have 15 plants and 24 ounces. That never would have passed. Colorado had the benefit of having a more limited medical program, if you want to call it a benefit, that only allowed 2 ounces of possession and 7 plants, like 3 mature, 4 immature, something like that. And with Amendment 64, they allowed people to grow their own plants at home at the same limit as the medical growers, 3 and 4, and halved the amount of pot you could have from 2 ounces to 1 ounce. So you don't have that perverse incentive in Colorado as you have in Washington. If I moved to Denver and I'm just a healthy guy and I want to get pot, well, I can have an ounce of it. And soon enough in Denver, I'm going to be able to go to stores to be able to buy it. And those stores, by and large, are going to be the same stores that are already serving the medical market. Because in another bright move in drafting the law, they gave first dibs to running the recreational stores to the medical outlets. So the medical outlets get first come, first serve chance at all the licenses. So you don't see the same kind of opposition from the dispensary set as much in Colorado as you do in Washington State. So this is something to consider, because I of course believe that the next 10 states to legalize marijuana are all states that currently have medical marijuana. Going to have to consider how the medical law gets folded in to the recreational market that's going to exist. Because I believe it's going to be untenable to have 2 separate markets for the same fungible product. We're going to have one market and largely one set of regulations to control marijuana smoking. In the future, these states that have both medical and recreational ought to look at medical perhaps just being a tax rebate or a state program for vouchers for free weed or something to that effect, which may still cause some incentive for people to want to be medical, but I think it's going to be easier to maintain that difference than to try to have 2 completely separate markets, one highly regulated and one operating in a gray area. Well, that sound means it's about all the time we got here in Hour 1, but stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the Marijuana Nation, where we go in depth into some more stories, including a look at another stupid prohibition story coming out of New Jersey. We've got an interesting story about your civil liberties. You know, the government doesn't think your medical records are private. They think they should be able to snoop in your medical records. We'll tell you how and why in Hour 2. Also, another look at school drug testing, some of the data behind school drug testing, and your calls at 971-533-7111 on any topic you choose. It's Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the Marijuana Nation. Thanks for joining us. Check out our new schedule at 420radio.org/schedule. For everyone here at the Russ Belville Show, I'm Radical Russ. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you